Hello and welcome back to Exothermic Plays Games. I'm Exothermic and the date today is Saturday, September 21st, 2024. I've been doing a countdown of my favorite video games of all time through each day of the year, and coming in at number 102 is Halo Combat Evolved. Okay, there are two things I want to get out of the way up front. First, this is technically the Halo Master Chief Collection. It contains this game, Halo 2, 3, ODST, Reach, and 4, both as single-player and multiplayer options for each. There's tons of quality of life things, like toggleable settings to make campaigns easier or harder, ways to just do specific missions and try to even speedrun them, loads of visual customization options, the works. But the gameplay is consistent and faithful to the originals. You can even toggle back and forth between updated and original graphics. For Combat Evolved, I'm definitely preferring the original for nostalgia's sake, but there are some sequences here where you might be like, that looks really different. That's because sometimes I didn't have it on the original, largely for cutscenes. However, and this is point number 2, I had a plan for the intro to this video, and then I was surprised that it was ruined. I was really hoping to start this video just on the title screen for Halo Combat Evolved in all its glory, and just let it sit there for a bit after introducing the game. They removed it. They removed, in my opinion, one of the most iconic things in the history of video games from the Master Chief Collection. I know this is going to sound dumb, but that title screen is up there with Sephiroth killing Aerith in my book. This game released on November 15th, 2001, on the same day as the original Xbox, Microsoft's big leap into the world of console gaming. It was a day one release. It was kind of the reason to buy the console at release. In many ways, that title screen was the herald to declare that the landscape of the entire industry was fundamentally changed for good. The choir, the strings, the drums, the Halo itself, all of it. And that's really the legacy of Halo Combat Evolved. I'm not saying all of this was because of some masterful design. Don't get me wrong, the game's great. Some of it was just the right place in the right time, though. But I think if you look at game design and the way people interact with games, there's a clear line of before Halo and after Halo. So, let's jump into the game itself, shall we? It's hard to talk about the gameplay for Halo without talking about how groundbreaking it was for the time. The game is filled with little details that revolutionized first-person shooters on consoles with a controller. Things like aim assist to make it so if you aimed, it's close enough, you probably got it. Or the way the game very subtly slows your turn rate while moving and the reticle passes over an enemy. There's a lot going on under the hood of Halo that's pretty standard practice today, but few games had these things before, and none of them did it quite as well. The campaign kicked off some of the most thoughtful world building in gaming, of course with the original trilogy and Reach, but also several novels, comics, animations, and more. That being said, the prequel novel did technically release a few weeks before the game did, so that was thankfully planned out very well. As you may have noticed from my Halo Reach video, when I ranked it as my 166th favorite game, this game starts off having just escaped the fall of Reach, but some Covenant did manage to track you down. They board the ship, and things are not going well. Master Chief is awoken from cryo and ready to kick some ass. Unlike the other Halo games, Combat Evolved is actually a space horror game in a fairly poor disguise. There's a lot of narrow corridors, dangers behind locked doors, and, depending on your difficulty, potentially an emphasis on running on fumes for ammo. The Pillar of Autumn, your ship you started out on, cannot be saved, and must instead crash land on the mysterious Halo below. Much of the game is alone, or at least mostly alone, with the super advanced artificial intelligence, Cortana, in your head. After escaping the pillar, you crash onto Halo and are the sole survivor of your crash, although there are other survivors that you'll find throughout and kind of help get to safety. But immediately, The game throws a bunch of information at you after you crash, but in a way that's easy to absorb and extrapolate as the player. The Covenant are after you. They've got superior firepower and certainly superior numbers. While you're taking in the majestic beauty of the cliffs and waterfalls, you're told to hide in the hills, where you'll see Covenant dropships, new weapons, wraiths, and if this is all new to you, as it was to me back in 2001 when I was 7, things start to click that there's something pretty big going on here, and as the player, we're only seeing a small, albeit important, part of it. I did mention that the game has a lot of narrow corridors, and while that's true, but it's not true all of the time. Importantly, as you go from confined space to confined space, you spend a lot of time on the surface of Halo with its vast open areas. It's great, and all of that just leads to when you are really confined, makes it feel more threatening as a space horror. Granted, when you start to look at things really, like on the big scale, it's all still hallways, but with very large ceilings to make them feel a lot bigger. You can explore, you can find alternate pathways, you can experiment with different weapons. It's great that the game gives you human and Covenant weaponry, but for the most part, in the campaign, I stick with the human guns and Combat Evolved. Ammo is more available, and I think they're easier to use. Through the outdoors part of the game, I really like to use snipers as much as I can, just picking off entire platoons of Covenant before I even get to them. Beyond that, my most used weapons are assault rifles or preferably shotguns when I can get them. Shotguns in this game are outrageous. You can shoot clear across most rooms with them and do close to maximum damage. This isn't rose-colored glasses or misremembering, obviously I just replayed it to record. They actively made them worse, making them still one of the best weapons in the game in later titles, but they had range in this game, which should not happen with a shotgun. Equally overpowered, however, and my eternal choice for one of my 2 weapon slots is the Halo Combat Evolved pistol. This could zoom so much more than it had any right to, and if you could land headshots, a not that difficult feat against many Covenant who have kind of big and goofy heads, it might as well have just been a rapid-fire sniper rifle with no kickback. This thing was cracked. Anyways, as you go through the campaign, you discover there's more going on here than just being a floating Covenant base in space, or at least that's what it appears at first. The Covenant are looking for something, perhaps? The Halo itself is a massive weapon of untold power, and you have to stop them from using it, at least that is the premise you're going in on. As you dig further and further into the depths of Halo, you discover the real threat facing not only humankind and the Covenant, but perhaps all known life. This is where the game reaches peak space horror, because you're fighting against a horrifying race called the Flood, which kill and then assimilate their prey, continuously growing their ranks. They are many, they are creepy, a lot of them are tiny and crawly, and I hate bugs, oh my god, burn them all. And that's actually kind of the idea of the Halo you're on in this game. The weapon would stop the Flood, and there's a little AI dude that floats around, and if you've played Portal 2, it kind of looks like Wheatley, actually, that is in charge of keeping it going, so you agree to help it. Until it is clarified, that is, that stopping the Flood means starving them of their food. The Halo would destroy all sentient life in the galaxy. So, you know, obviously, that's bad. You scramble back to the Pillar of Autumn, whose crazy warp drive, or whatever it is that powers it, is the only fuel source big enough to do what you have to do. You gotta blow up the Halo. After its destruction and your escape, but also the survival of the AI that was protecting it, and now aware of way more information than it previously had, the stage is set for Halo 2. The campaign is groundbreaking, smartly written, and while it's entirely exposition, which had its own exposition, for the overall story here, it definitely stands strong on its own. And while all of that's great, that's not even the main reason this game was successful. The multiplayer in Halo Combat Evolved slaps. Unfortunately, no version of the game had bots for multiplayer, so in order to record it, I had to wait quite a while in lobby for the Master Chief Collection, and apparently the only game mode people are willing to play anymore is King of the Hill, which is a great game mode, but I wanted to show more. Alas, while groundbreaking at the time, there's definitely better multiplayer shooters available, even just in this collection, than Halo 1. Disclaimer for everything you're about to see, if it wasn't apparent from the campaign footage, I suck at first-person shooters. You could play free-for-all or on teams. Of course, the default team colors of red versus blue are extraordinarily iconic, if nothing else for the web series of the same name. You could do Slayer, which is just kill as many enemies as possible without dying. First person or team to a certain score wins. There's King of the Hill, which requires a team to control a moving tactical location. That's what you're seeing here. There's two other modes I never quite liked in Oddball, which is basically hold onto the skull for as long as possible while everyone else is out to get you, and Race, which is quite literally a race through checkpoints, except you're allowed to shoot at the other racers. I never really cared for those last two, just eh. But for me, the best game mode in the first Halo was Capture the Flag. It required great teamwork, being the flag carrier felt amazing, and having a good flag carrier on your team was a blessing. You could drop the flag, shoot at people, then pick it up. If you were really good at it, you could keep throwing it in front of you, and then shooting and running, picking it up, throwing it, and so on, so you could kind of carrying it without even having much of the downside. But most importantly, it emphasized my favorite thing about this whole game, the vehicles. I love Halo's vehicles. The Warthog is such a simple yet vital thing, highlighting the greatest parts of the game's multiplayer, being able to have one person drive, one person on the turret, and one person riding shotgun, perhaps with a literal shotgun. You could specialize in your role on a team, especially in Capture the Flag. Picking up a passenger in your vehicle could make or break your chances at winning. When this came out, my dad bought 4 enormous CRT TVs, 4 Xboxes, loads of cables and controllers, and set it all up in his game store, which didn't even sell video games, to host tournaments on LAN. If you've never played a 16-player Capture the Flag, with everyone all sitting in basically a circle on the different TVs, it's one of the greatest gaming experiences I've ever had. There were a lot of problems with that too, of course, but it was and is awesome. Also, this game had some of the greatest first-person shooter maps ever made. It had some not-so-great ones, but it had some great ones. There's Battle Creek, which I always found funny, being from Michigan. For those unaware, Battle Creek, Michigan is a city with a population of about 50,000 people. But regardless of that funny yet appropriate name, this map is great. Opposing bases are pretty close together, so you get into the action right away, but there's the invisibility power-up nestled away in the river, the sniper nest up on top of the cliffside, and the verticality of the rock bridges and the buildings, and it's so good. But of course, the greatest map ever has to be Blood Gulch. It's massive. It's so big, there's teleporters to the halfway point of the map on top of each base. You could have dueling snipers shooting from rooftops while vehicles rage throughout the enormous expanse of open land, or have people sneaking through the mountain pathways on the sides. When I talked about loving Capture the Flag, I'm talking about loving Blood Gulch, really. Like, the map makes you start with access to flying vehicles because it's so big and difficult to traverse. Halo Combat Evolved radically changed the landscape of the video game industry overnight, making a genre that was previously more or less exclusive to PC gaming, competitive first-person shooters, accessible to entire families, whether it be couch split-screen multiplayer at home or setups like at my dad's store. Really driving everything home for the multiplayer was actually the narrator, the voice, saying things, the kill-tacular, unfreaking believable. I shouldn't be trying to do impersonations, but that thing was so great and instantly, I think, pulled everyone in. You couldn't play online yet, and maybe I'm biased because that made my dad a decent amount of money for a while, but I also think that made the game better because it fostered this fascinating community, and, you couldn't really yell at strangers how much attention you gave their mom last night in the middle of a public setting of a mall store. Well, some people tried, but, I said there were problems. Anyways, join me tomorrow as I talk about my 101st favorite game, where I learned way later that the character I played was so good, it got banned. Never would have guessed from any of my play, of course.